Good morning. This is the Boerne Brew, and this is Boerne Radio, 103.9 FM and AM 1500. My name is Roland J. Ruiz, and I know right now all of our loyal listeners are looking at their radio right now going, what? What's with the voice here? Not used to not hearing Jeff Flynn or Kerry Barboza. Well, you can rest easy. Kerry Barboza is with us this Saturday morning. We're just kind of turning the tables a little bit on Kerry. We're putting him in the guest seat this week, so he can disseminate some of that vast knowledge that he has on so much going on with Boerne sports and the area, I guess schools in the area as well. Kerry, I tell you, pointing out the elephant in the room right now, this is going to hit the air July 19th. It's an interesting, I don't want to say it's a rough time, but I just did. It's kind of a tough time figuring that, baseball is over, the All-Star games are over, and players that have represented Boerne in, say, for example, this year in Round Rock or in San Antonio, they're done for the year. We're just on the outside of summer camp starting. As you were mentioning off air, they're going to start up on August 4th. What does a sports editor do at this point to try and find content?
Well, a lot of different things, and thanks, Roland, for having me in the hot seat today. Appreciate it. Do different things. One of the things I like to do is feature stories. I get up with kids and maybe coaches that have left or kids that are playing in college that have done well and write stories about them, how they're enjoying their college life, and talk to them about their time at Boerne and how that impacted them. A lot of times there's new coaches, so I sit with the new coaches and talk with them and talk about their background and what brought them to Boerne. There's a few summer things going on. There's a big track team in Boerne, Hill Country Comets. I know it's over 100 members, about 150, and they do track meets during the summer, and some of them I know have qualified for the Junior Olympics, and some have qualified for the state meet as well, and that's coming up at the end of the month and early part of August. So there's more than you would think, and there's all these camps that these schools do. Boerne High does a lot. Champion does a lot. They combine them. Comfort does camps. Geneva does camps. And there'll be like a 2 or 3 day football camp, 2 or 3 day volleyball camp. And the coaches get these young kids in there and they teach them the basics. And I go and take photos. It's interesting to watch these young kids trying to learn the game and to learn the sport. And so I do that. And so I fill up the pages. It is harder because there's not the structured game and the structured schedule every Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday or whatever like it is during the school year. But there's enough out there. You just got to hustle a little bit.
Yeah, right on the doorstep of that, as we talked about, August the 4th is when teams can start reporting. We mentioned both football and volleyball can report to schools for, I guess, training camp beginning that day?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And in the past, Champion has done spring drills in football. If you do spring drills, you have up to 3 weeks. You can do it in May. If you do that, you have to give a week back in August. And so they wouldn't have been able to start till the 11th or whatever that next Monday is. But because they didn't do spring drills this year, they get to start August 4th with the freshmen. Now, the freshmen can start at each school on August 4th, even if you did spring. But it's just the freshmen that week. But if you did spring, you have to give back a week. Champion has historically done spring drills. Boerne has never done them. And the head coach, Brett Sawyer, said he's never going to do them as long as he's there. He doesn't want to do them. But Blaine Ellis at Champion, they were going to do them, but because they lost their offensive coordinator, they lost their quarterbacks coach. They didn't really know what kind of offense they would be running, what kind of formations, and so they just felt like it'd be better to wait. And then they have a lot of baseball guys that are in football, and baseball went 4 rounds, as we know. So that took a lot of those guys out of it, and so they wouldn't be able to do the spring drills. And they do have that option that they can do them. And a few kids do them, but Blaine just felt like it would be better to wait and just start completely over. By then, they'd have an offensive coordinator. They would know what offense they were running, what schemes, what the plays were going to be called. And everybody could be on the same page from day one in August. This is the first for them to have to get back a week in several years, actually.
Kerry, you mentioned 2 sport athletes, and one of the ones that has stood out is Brooks Perez. And we were talking about him last Friday as we found out that Brooks has now committed to Duke. And I know you just recently did a story on that, the Boerne Star.
Yeah, so Brooks was a really good football player. He was a 2-sport guy, like you said, and I think he's the all-time, it's either receptions or yards. Douglas Hodo has one of them, and then Brooks has the other. I'm not sure which is which. I think Douglas has catches, and I think Brooks has yards. I'm not sure. It's one or the other. So he was obviously a very good athlete, very good football player, big kid, over 6 feet, about 6'2", it seems like. And he's also a heck of a baseball player, as we know. And he had committed to University of Houston. He'd signed with them. And then I think what happened at Houston is they kind of overcommitted guys, and they had too many guys basically on the roster. And so they couldn't guarantee spots for everybody. And so instead of just kind of trying to deal with that, I think Brooks just decided to look elsewhere and pursue other options. I know his cousin is going to Baylor, so I think he's good there. But Brooks looked around on his Twitter platform X. He put that he had decommitted from Houston and was going to look around. And then about a week later, he writes on there he's going to Duke. And you and I talked about it. And I talked to his coach, and he said it's a good fit for him. Said it's probably a step up going from Big 12 to ACC, depending on how you look at all that. So he's going to get to play in the ACC with a good program. And hopefully he likes it out there. It's in North Carolina. I lived out there for a few years, and it's a nice place, but it's far away from home. So, that doesn't work for everybody, and we'll see how Brooks likes it. But if it doesn't work, there's other options for him that he can do other things.
Brooks taking his talents to Tobacco Road.
Yep, there you go.
Certainly wish him the best, and good luck there with the Blue Devils. Now, let me ask you, 23 years here with the Boerne Star newspaper, okay? I'm going to assume one of the biggest stories along that time has been Boerne becoming a 2 high school town, and that's been the case since, 2008?
Yes. So when I started at the Star in 2002, I basically covered Comfort and Boerne High, and that was it. And then there was talking about another school, and then that opens, like you said, in 2008, Boerne Champion opens, and then around that time, Geneva opens. Little private school that's really blossomed and done very well athletically. So it kind of doubled my workload. But yeah, that's been the biggest change, I think, since I've been here is the growth of Boerne and becoming a 2 high school town versus a 1 high school town. Because once you go to the 2 high school town, you never go back, right? You never go back to that 1 high school town where everybody's behind that one team. Now, it's kind of divided loyalties to a degree. I think most people cheer for both. But if it's Friday night, one's on the road and one's at the stadium here in town. So if you're going to go to a game, you got to pick. You can't do both. So there's the north end of town, which is Boerne High, and the south end of town, which is Champion. And now there's talk down the road that within a decade, they might have to open a 3rd high school just because of the growth. And Boerne ISD could be a 1 high school town still. They'd be a 6A. They'd be like a Judson type with close to 4,000 students, but they chose not to go that route. They just wanted to keep it manageable. So Champion's at about 2,000 and Boerne High's at 1,600. So they went that route instead of being the big school that had 4,000 kids. They wanted to keep it 2 smaller schools. I wasn't sure what I thought of that, but looking back at it, I think it's an opportunity for kids now because instead of 5 starters at one school, now you have 10 starters, 5 at one, 5 at the other. So now there's a chance for those kids now that maybe didn't play a lot. They could go to another school and start, so now they're going to have an opportunity and maybe get some looks. Who knows? I mean, the recruiting process is a lot different than you and I, played sports 180 years ago. But it's different now, but teams still get looked at, players still get looked at. And if you put up good numbers at a school, you might get some nibbles. So it's a good opportunity, the 2-school system. I know it's doubled my workload, but I think this is an opportunity, kids. And there's been some kids that have really taken advantage of that opportunity and have really shone brightly with that opportunity.
We talk about this 2-school system, and we go back to the early days of Champion High School, where at the time, Champion was the bigger school, Boerne the smaller school. They were in 2 different districts. That's not the case anymore.
Right.
Now they're both in the same district. What kind of dynamic does that bring to what you're covering?
Yeah, Boerne was a 4A basically for the longest time, and they kept saying, because the UIL realigns every 2 years, they kept saying, well, Boerne's going to be a 5A this year, and it wouldn't happen. And I've heard that for 3 straight alignments. Boerne's going to be a 5A this year, and it never happened. And then they said it the 4th time, and it finally happened, where they became a 5A. Now, football, they still haven't played yet, because Champion is a Division I 5A, and Boerne High is a Division II, so they're in different football districts. But everything else they played this year. I thought that was pretty cool. It'd been 15 years that the teams had coexisted in the same town, and they never played. So there was no real reason why they didn't play. I think early on, Champion would have had quite an advantage in most of the sports. Not all of them, but in a lot of them. And Boerne would have done well in certain sports against them. Basketball, baseball, I think especially. But some of the other sports, I think Boerne would have struggled against the Chargers. But now they're at the same size, and they can play. They were in the same soccer district for a few years because at one point 4A didn't have its own classification, so they had to play up. If you were a 4A, you played up at 5A. So Boerne and Champion were in the same soccer districts, and tennis teams, they played one time at a tournament. They were in the same swim meets, the same cross-country meets, the same track meets. But they hadn't played in all the other sports: water polo, volleyball, baseball, softball, boys basketball, girls basketball. This was the first year, and I thought it was great. There was good crowds. The gyms for basketball and the volley were pretty much capacity. I don't know if they ever sold out, but they were pretty much full. There was even talk, well, let's move this game to a bigger venue in San Antonio because of the crowd, but I'm glad they kept it in Boerne, and it drew well.
That's got to be fun, though, to have a crowd of local parents, local fans on both sides with a very friendly rivalry now that you got in city, so that's got to be a real cool element to this as well.
Yeah, I agree. And those kids know each other. They grew up, some go to the same middle school, and then when they get to high school, they split and go to a different one. So those kids know each other. They play on a lot of the same teams together away from the school, club teams, travel teams. And I tell you, the games, the thing I noticed is the intensity was there. It was a rivalry. It was friendly, but it was intense. I mean, these kids, they want to get the better end. They want bragging rights, especially for the first time to say, hey, the first time we ever played this school, we beat them. And we're always going to have that on our resume. And so I thought it was pretty intense. And then afterwards, it's all about Boerne. They shook hands. The sun came up the next day. So it was a good thing. And I know coaches were counting, okay, we beat them in these sports and they beat us in these sports. And I think at a certain point, all that's going to go away and they're just going to play every year. And no one's going to really care who won or what the record is. And I think the crowds will still show up.
Legendary Boerne Greyhounds and the Chargers of Samuel Champion High School. Who was Samuel Champion that the high school was named after?
Well, I got to meet Sam. He was a great guy. I met him in 2002 when I first started, and he ended up passing away in 2007. He'd been pretty sick that year before, so he wasn't around a lot in 2006. And he passed away early 2007, I believe. And they had a funeral for him, and they couldn't find a church or a place big enough to accommodate the crowd. So they moved it to San Antonio, his funeral, and they had it at Oak Hills right there off 10 in Camp Bullis. And I think at that time, that auditorium that they had there at Oak Hills held about 1,800, close to 2,000. And it was basically standing room only there. I remember the funeral was supposed to start at like 7 o'clock or whatever that night, and they had to delay the start of the funeral because of traffic snarled in on that 10 exit from Camp Bullis to get into the church. The traffic was backed up for miles for cars trying to get into the parking lot, so they had to delay the start so that people could get in. And so Sam was a great guy. Two things about Sam that stood out is his love for the kids. He really loved the kids. He really did. He'd talk about them. He'd get real emotional when he would talk about them because they really meant a lot to him. One thing he did, he always did coloring books. He would take pictures of the players and put their image in a coloring book and put their names, and there were more caricatures of them, And for whatever reason, he always included me in the coloring books, so that was always kind of neat. So I have a stack of them there. It's pretty neat. But Sam, like I said, he loved the kids. That was the thing I think that stood out the most, and just how beloved he was. He really was beloved. And just a real quick story about Sam is I had been, like I said, I started in 2002, and I was new at the job, and I went to a track meet first week or two. I didn't know any of the Boerne kids. I didn't know. I just saw the Boerne Greyhound uniforms. So I was taking photos of these track kids, and Boerne was hosting a meet. I needed names of these kids, and I didn't know the names. And so back then, you could just drive up to the school and walk in. They didn't have the security guard and all that, all that kind of thing. So I was looking for the track coach, and I had photos I had printed out. And I was going to have him just ID the kids. And I see Sam in the hall, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, I need some names from these track kids. And he said, "Let me see." And he kind of grabbed them out of my hand, and he put the photos on his desk, and he just wrote the names of every single kid. I had like 30 kids, and he knew every single one, and he wrote them all down. He says, "Here you go. You need anything else?" And I said, "No, that'll do it." He says, "All right, get out of here." He was a jokester that way. He didn't mean like get out of here. He was just playing around, but he was that kind of guy. And I think his love for the kids really stood out, and they named the school after him. And I think at Tyler Voss, they named Voss Middle School after Tyler. And Tyler played at Boerne High. He was an 2004 graduate, went to the Air Force Academy. And he was part of Enduring Freedom, and he served in the Middle East, and he died in a plane crash. His KC-135 passed away in 2013. And the fact that he went to the Air Force Academy, he played soccer. I remember that. And he was a real leader on the field. He was a vocal leader. He was a take charge kind of a guy, and I think the military fit him well. So they named the new middle school after Tyler. So, you have someone like Sam, someone like Tyler, gets the school named after them. So that tells you a little bit something about those guys and their character and what the community thought of them.
If you're just joining us, yes, you're listening to the Boerne Brew here on Boerne Radio 103.9 FM at AM 1500. I am Roland J. Ruiz in Kerry Barboza's regular seat, as Kerry Barboza kind of lets us know about what's going on and some of the points of interest concerning Boerne sports. And, mentioning Sam Champion and Tyler Voss, as you just did, and you had brought up a possible another high school here in Boerne. Could one Stan Leech's name be the naming rights of that high school?
Could be. It makes you wonder what the mascot would be, right? Yeah, I don't know. So that's the talk I'm hearing is, at some point down the road, within a decade, that they're looking at a third high school. So if you're going to name a school after anybody in Boerne, he's the guy, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, he's been here. He's going on close to 40 years. Not all of that is AD, but he's been AD for the last 25 or whatever it's been. So when I started in 2002, he was already the athletic director. So, yeah, he's a great guy, and, he loves his job. That's one thing I'll say about Stan. He really loves his job, and if you're going to name a school after anybody, he's the guy. And he's told me, he says, I'm never retiring. He says, they're going to have to carry me away. He says, if you see the funeral home car at the rock pile where his office is, you know why they're there, because that's the only way I'm leaving.
We had him on the Boerne Brew just a handful of weeks ago. And it amazes me, much like it does with yourself, Kerry, how you can put him in a situation and you can say, well, for example, player X, had a big double-double in this particular game that you played against, I don't know, pick a school, Tybee or whomever. And, he had 23 points and 12 rebounds in this particular, and he'll remember the game. He'll remember where he got that 23rd point. Yeah. He is a wealth of knowledge. I mean, and he keeps all of this in his head.
Yeah, and we sat and talked a couple times, and we start talking about this and that, and he's like, how do you remember that? I don't know. I ask him, how do you remember that? And, we just go back and forth. So I just can remember stuff for whatever reason, but the more years you do it, it starts kind of getting cloudy in there. But watching Stan and being his friend and getting to know him over the last 20 plus years, I think two things stand out to me about him is, one, the coaches he hires, he doesn't look at your one-loss record before you come here. I remember a coach she coached at a school that wasn't very good in soccer, and I think one year they won one game, and the next year they didn't win any. She applied for a job in Boerne, got the job, and Stan didn't say, oh, you didn't win any games at this school. And so he didn't hold that against her, and he gave her a chance. Well, she got the soccer team to the state tournament 3 times. So he could see talent. And think of Michael Strong, the boys' soccer coach at Boerne High. He'd never been a head coach. He'd been in the business world. He'd worked for Target. He did some soccer stuff on the weekends, like a recruiting service type thing, but he'd never been a head coach. And he gets his certification, and he applies for the job at Boerne High, and Stan gives it to him. And he wins 2 state championships. And then he finished second in the other year, almost won 3 in a row. So he recognizes the ability regardless of where you're coming from and your one-loss record. So I admire that about him. And another thing I appreciate about Stan is he remembers the past. He honors those who've come before him. We started the Hall of Honor. Well, he started the Hall of Honor, and I'm on the committee that helps to pick. And it's like a Hall of Fame, and you help to pick people who should get into the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Honor. And we started back with the 58 boys basketball team at Boerne High. It was the first team in Boerne history to medal at state. We honored them. We got the first state champion in Boerne history, Richard Herms, the track guy. We got him in there. John Canavan, 1955. He was a graduate, and this past year in 2024, last fall, they celebrated 100 years of Boerne football. So he had guys from as far back as possible. And I think the oldest generation was from the 60s at a game. And they had 60s, 70s up until today. And those guys were mingling with the teenagers that were on this past year's team. And so you have, 7 generations all in one spot. And he gave them all medals for being a part of that. So it was great seeing those guys. I knew a guy that was there from the 50s that had graduated. And so to see all those guys and stand through the Hall of Honor and through ceremonies like that, he remembers the past and he honors it. Now we have record of all those things now, and so we know who's done what and who has the records and all that, and it's kind of neat. It's a neat part of history.
Absolutely. I had the honor of sitting next to Stan Leech for a couple of high school basketball broadcasts, the All-Star game several months ago, and of course for several Boerne and Boerne champion high school games. It's truly an honor to sit next to Stan Leech, and it's something I'll take with me forever. Well, as we talked about before we got started here, Kerry, this 30 minutes is going to blast by.
Wow.
So we would be amiss to not mention, and we need to mention this because they certainly have emerged as a private school powerhouse, and that is Geneva.
Yeah, Geneva's done really well. As a matter of fact, one of the things as a sports writer I've always wanted to cover was a team that won a state championship in football. And Geneva did that for me. It was kind of a bucket list thing. In 2018, they were playing state title in Waco. They got beat. Hate to say it was a bad call, but
I didn't hear that.
It was a questionable call, I'll put it that way. So they go back the next year and they win it all. And that was a great experience as a sports writer to cover a team that wins a state championship. They won another one before that as six-man. So I don't know if you've ever seen six-man football. It's pretty neat. Yeah.
Love it.
It's wide open. It's like a track meet, basically. And there's a mercy rule at halftime, and yeah, it's the way it's done is different.
Throw passes to your center.
Yeah.
I love it, man.
Yeah, and there's a smaller field. I think it's an 80-yard field, and it's just very different. But they won that one, but then they won the 11-man in 2019. And so the UIL does what they call the Lone Star Cup, and that's accumulate points throughout the school year. If you win your district, you get so many points. Each round you advance in the playoffs, you get so many points. If you win a state title, you keep earning points, and you do it in all the different sports. And they add some of the extracurricular stuff besides athletics. They add some academic and one-act play and all that. I wish they do two separate ones, fine arts one and then an athletic one, but they combine them together. And the winner with the most points at the end of the year gets the Lone Star Cup. And champion won it one year. I think it was for UIL. I think it was 2011 or 12, right around there. They were the best 5A in the state, cumulative point-wise. And I think the difference was they had an academic team or a one-act play team that got like 2 points at a state meet, and that was the difference and why they won it. But TAPS, which is what Geneva is part of, they're not UIL, they're TAPS, Texas Association of Private Parochial Schools. They do a similar thing, and it's called the Henderson Cup, and I'm not sure who it's named after other than a guy named Henderson. But since 2010, Geneva's won the Henderson Cup 11 times as the best private school in their specific classification. They go by classifications. So they've won it 4 times as a 4A, twice as a 2A, twice as a 3A, and then 3 times as a 1A. So they've got some great athletes over there. You got 2 public schools like we talked about. And you got Comfort down the road. We love Comfort. Comfort, they get coverage. They're still in Kendall County, and they've had some great teams and great coaches over the years. But, Geneva's done well in Boerne. They've carved out a nice niche for themselves, and they're well known, and they've done well for themselves, and it's a well-run school there, and they have quality people leading that program and leading that school. And, the head coach, we had him on, Bob Rosensteel, guy played in the NFL. So they got some quality guys, and they're in good shape to be the best in your classification 11 times since 2010. They've really taken their program and excelled in a lot of different ways.
Kerry Barboza, in 1 minute or less, can you tell me the biggest change you've seen in Boerne after your 23-year career here?
That's easy, Roland. I think we were talking about it's got to be growth. It's just the way Boerne has grown. It's an expensive place to live, but people are still flocking here trying to get in and get their kids into these schools. And I think that's the biggest issue facing Boerne and facing the school district is schools and adding schools and building schools, and where do you put these kids and the growth. And so that's a good problem to have, right? I mean, that's a good problem. There's some schools that don't have that problem and some districts that don't have that problem, and it's an expensive place. I remember there was a house that was for sale right around the high school, and we bought the refrigerator for our kitchen at work, and we went to pick it up that house, and I asked the guy, I said, how much did that sell for, the house? And he said, it was $117. You couldn't get a one-car garage in Boerne for $117 now.
These days, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's over $300 now. That house would be, I'm sure, over $300. So that right there by the school is probably tripled in value. But growth is a good thing. Prices go up, because there's a demand for housing and all that sort of thing. But people are still coming here, and so it's a good problem to have, like I said, and Boerne's going to grow. It's grown a lot. I think it's going to continue to grow, and I think the growth is going to be something in the future that they're always going to have to deal with, and I think it's going to be a surprising amount of growth.
few minutes ago, I mentioned the honor it is to sit next to Stan Leech and to be able to broadcast some high school basketball games this past season and in seasons gone by. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth can be said. I feel the same honor sitting next to the man that I've been talking to today every football season for the Chargers and for the Boerne Greyhounds. And are we ready for some football again this season?
I know I am.
All right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I was trying to count the games you and I have done. I don't know, because I've worked with different people over the years, but I started working with Andy Everett back in 2002. That fall of 2002 was my first year with Bobby Stotzenberger and Texas Sports Productions. Now it's called TSP. Yeah, so 10 games. That's not counting playoffs. So I don't know. I'm about close to 300 games if you count playoffs or something like that. So at least 250. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy working with you, Roland. People don't know this about you, but you do a lot in the city of San Antonio. You're the PA guy for the Missions. You're the PA guy for the Spurs. So you've got the voice, Roland. You got the voice.
Well, thank you very much. And I have a face for radio, as I've been told several times. Unlike you, my friend. But Kerry Barboza, sports editor of the Boerne Star newspaper, thank you for joining us. Let's do this again.
All right. Sounds good.
You've been enjoying the Boerne Brew here on Boerne Radio, 103.9 FM at AM 1500. Till next time, I'm Roland J. Reese. Have a great weekend.